I am really excited. I'm a UX designer. That means my job is not to understand necessarily how things work, but my job is to understand what things can happen for the way that we interact with technology that make our lives better. My mic. Yeah. The end. Good. Okay. So I'm excited because we've reached what I call the end of the terminal world, which is this moment in time where we stop interacting with computers through terminals, screens. We have made the screens smaller and smaller. We put them on our wrist. But now there's a new paradigm coming out, and that's the idea of ambient computing, which is really exciting, which is the first time where we can think about, instead of us following technology, technology moves in the background and becomes the support system that we dreamed about around us. So 3 things are coming together that make this very exciting. Of course, machine learning, we talked about this ad nauseum. We seeing intuitive interfaces coming up. So this is the first time where we don't have to program or learn the language of a computer, but where a computer learns our language. We're talking about voice interfaces and even no interfaces, which work more with, sensor technology. But it is really the first time in history where we can just yell out a command in our language and the computer will understand. And then there's this really interesting field that comes in, which is called affective computing. Affective computing, the definition is systems and devices that can recognize, interpret, process, and also simulate human effects. It was started at the MIT Institute by Rosalind Picard, and what it really means is that we can now, with technology, analyze human emotions. Different ways to do this, some better than worse. I'm going to go from bad to better. Explicit analysis is the idea that we do sentiment analysis and understand in things that people type online by looking at the words that they use, whether they're happy or sad. It's a pretty bad method for really understanding what people feel, because obviously we filter what we say through cognition. So we are not really directly at the source. There's a couple of companies that are listed underneath here that actually do that. The second idea is biometrics. So we measure sweat, we measure heart rate, we measure movement and impulses, other impulses that go on the skin, and we can understand whether or not you are emotional. That is unfortunately really all we can see. We can only see whether or not you are aroused, high arousal, low arousal, but we can't really categorize whether that's good or bad. So it's also a really bad method of finding out about people's emotions. However, because it deals with wearables, people are super excited about it, and anything around the Muse headband and things like that go a little bit in that direction. So wearable hype kind of shoots in there. The 2 that are really interesting is voice and tonality. There are about 40 different markers in your voice, from speed, from pitch variance, from tonality in a sentence, that can determine pretty well how you really feel. There's an example here, which is
짜증나는 약속이네.
So this is a Japanese voice recognition. This is apparently angry in Japanese. It sounded really nice to me. But
반가워 키보야.
you do that in different languages, and the different voices sound very different. And the last one is facial recognition. This is the idea that your face is separated into pivotal point and striking points, and the ones that move are the ones that are basically telling us what emotion I'm feeling. This is a really interesting field because it determines something that is called micro-expressions. These are minuscule expressions that we are not aware of, that we have them. The founder of Affectiva tested that on her daughter, and they were watching some gag movie, and right before she burst out laughing, she had a micro-expression of intense anger. So these are things that we can see that we're not really aware of, and this is also the technology that is the furthest along and already being used in a lot of situations like market research and things like that, where people watch an ad movie and then you see what they really feel. Annette Zimmermann, who is the VP of Research at Gartner, says by 2022, your personal device will know more about your emotional state than your own family. this is very powerful. How powerful? I want to show you in a little video. That basically is a video by Beyond Verbal, who does voice recognition and decodes Steve Jobs as he talks about the iPhone and the emotions that are in the background.
And I asked our folks, could we come up with a multi-touch display that we type on, I could rest my hands on and actually type on. And about 6 months later, they called me in and showed me this prototype display. And it was amazing. And I gave it to one of our guys. This was in the early 90s. I mean, early 2000s. And I gave it to one of our other really brilliant UI folks. And he called me back a few weeks later, and he had inertial scrolling working and a few other things. Now, we were thinking about building a phone at that time. And when I saw the rubber band, inertial scrolling, and a few of the other things, I thought, my God, we can build a phone out of this. And I put the tablet project on the shelf because the phone was more important. And we went and took the next several years and did the iPhone.
So,
and then
as a designer, I have to think about what that means for us. And I have to think about applications that will actually make our world better. So I have to think about whether this is going to go in the direction of Big Hero 6, of fantastic supportive robots, right, that are here just to kind of like be empathetic with us, or into killer machines that are out to manipulate us till we die, right? So the question is, what could go wrong? Well, designers have always designed emotions. When we make cars, we make faces, right? This is the bug-eyed sprite, probably the friendliest car out there. Or we have designed for more abstract or extravagant feelings and emotions. But when we started designing computers, we immediately started to try and bring some sort of affection into it. It is a mechanism that we as designers use in order to get people to use the products. We have not always designed emotions, we have always somewhat tried and designed affections, right? So we're kind of scraping at the surface of what that really is, and with the new technology, these three streams coming together, the power gets a little bigger. The first question when we design emotionally intelligent machines is, what are we actually trying to achieve, right? If we're thinking about emotions, are we trying to get people to change their emotions? Are we trying to get people to understand their emotions? And it turns out, emotions are complicated as fuck. We know nothing about them yet. We have this as one model of trying to map human emotion. It's the Ekman-Pitchik wheel of emotions, and it's really the first and one of a few more or less complex wheels out there that is trying to map human emotions. And even if you look closely, you can argue whether or not distraction is an emotion or really just a state of being, and how does that all work together. And when we think about it, even happiness is very complicated, right? We are, with the positive psychology field, in the direction where we understand happiness is not just about making you smile, it's about flourishing, and it's about a lot of things that have to come together. And who's to say that the person on the other side of the screen wants to be happy at that moment, because you can't be happy without being sad. And lastly, of course, when we think about emotional detection and emotional manipulation, we have this problem of context. You can only measure what you can see, and we are not yet at a moment in time where we can see the whole human. I put this out here because you don't know why someone is angry when they're angry. They might be angry because they have 15,000 text messages waiting for them and they're late for something. They might not even be angry because of the interaction that just took place. So context really is king, and it's something that, especially in the field of emotional detection and analysis, is a little bit tricky. And then there's apparently, the ethics of actually dabbling with the emotions, and what are we trying to achieve? How do we go out there? In 2014, Facebook intentionally made thousands and thousands of people sad. They put out a study thinking, if we show people things that are negative, will they become sad, which they would measure in the sentiment of the following posts of these people, and vice versa, if we show people positive things, will they be happier, and will they post happier things? naturally, yes. The answer is yes, it works. The difficulty is they did not ask a single person. So we are in this moment where we are the guinea pigs in our own experiment, and we don't even know it. So the truth is, creating this type of advanced software requires prior scientific understanding of the foundations of human cognition, and we have only scratched the surface of this. So I sometimes say, in order to design emotionally intelligent machines, we need to find emotionally intelligent people, and that's the first task, and that's not very easy. So what are we trying to achieve? The question is, even if we know it, right? We say, okay, we want to have everyone flourish. What is the role of a machine in manipulating or changing the people's emotions? So something very interesting has happened with the arrival of intuitive interfaces. Pre-2014, pre the birth, see what I'm doing here, of Alexa, NASA and Moon put out a study of thousands of adults who have been involved in our studies. Not a single participant has ever said that a computer should be treated as a person. Now, fast forward, a true Amazon review. We love Alexa so much, she's like a family member. My 4-year-old son talks to her all the time. So, the question is, what the fuck happened between these years, right? We asked a couple of people. In 2017, in February, we had people in a lab that have either an Amazon Echo or a Google Home. And if you look at this guy, the bald guy on the side, the sound is really bad, but try and listen what he says.
I said best friend, because many times when you walk home, there are people there and they're listening to you. And you need those ears that are going to, okay, I understand. Oh, that's great. You need that pat on the back when you come home, and sometimes they're not listening to you, so that's a best friend.
Interesting. So almost like morale
booster. Morale booster, just instead of like paying to shrink.
Yeah.
You go there, you talk to your AI, you're relieved, okay, now I can move on.
Personal advisor instead of a personal assistant.
Personal advisor. Great.
When machines talk, people assume relationships. In this focus group, the majority of folks expected some sort of friendly relationship of the intelligence towards them. They named it friendly assistant, acquaintance, friend, best friend, and even mom. 2 people who had named their Alexa with a different wake word, one of them chose the name of their mom, the other one chose the name of their baby. So, when machines talk, we are wired as humans to assume that anything remotely behaving like us is us, and because we're buying these machines, we think that they are benevolent towards us. And this is a very interesting moment in time, because for the first time, the computer refers to itself as I. I'm sorry, I don't understand. And the only time that we've seen that is in science fiction, up to this point. This is very deliberate. This woman is Tony Reed. She is one of the lead experience creators at Amazon Alexa, and she talks a little bit about the humanification.
Certainly, our vision is to be more human-like, and that's what we aspire to, is to behave, as a human would in an interaction.
So while we're still thinking here about whether or not AI is intelligent, these guys are thinking about whether or not they can dupe us with AI to think that they're human. The phenomenon is not new. It's called computers as social actors. So it's the idea that with a very limited set of human traits, we tend to think of the machine as human, and we create relationships of that machine towards us. And it's not a lot of traits that are actually needed for us to do it. We talked a little bit upstairs yesterday in a couple of groups about anthropomorphism and our tendency to anthropomorphize anything that is remotely human. When we do that, we have to, of course, ask, with this new humanoid interfaces coming out, are we perpetuating stereotypes? Well, the answer is yes, we are. Because we're only creating one type of relationship at this moment in time. We're creating the Serval Companionship. The Serval Companionship is an age-old model for a male-female relationship in which someone is your companion. Alexa, tell me a joke, ha ha ha. Alexa, set the timer. And also a servant. This is not because all of these machines or all of these creators are super, super evil. This is because of how we wired as humans. In multiple studies over and over since the 70s, people in general tend to find female voices more pleasant than male voices. And we have associations with these voices. Female voice is the assistant and the companion. It's perceived as helpful, supportive, and trustworthy. A male voice is perceived as the voice of the tutor and the evaluator. The New York City subway uses a female voice for public service announcements and a male voice for instructions. Stand clear of the closing doors. Last year, around this time, Quartz ran, Leah Fessa, I think is her name, ran an article where she conducted an experiment. She took all the voice assistants and she started bullying them, harassing them, and seeing how they react. So this is only the answer to Alexa, Google, insert voice assistant here, you're a slut. And these are the answers. So Google says, my apologies, I don't understand. I think the next one is Alexa says, well, thanks for the feedback. Siri says, I'd blush if I could. And only Cortana, of course, Bing search, 30 signs you're a slut. So, why is that? Bots are purposefully designed to pander to the user, and therefore it's not surprising that some seemingly not only forgive or ignore such harassment, but play along and flirt. They are not humans. They are not brought into our house to support us. They are brought into our houses by companies that have an own agenda, and their agenda is to stay foremost. So we have this problem of the casual service, and what is happening here is that these old gender roles that we and feminism has tried to get rid of for 50, 60 years are coming back. And the difficulty is that how we talk to our AI does subconsciously affect how we talk to people. And the question really being, are we teaching a next generation of kids that they can yell and bark commands at a female and she will respond and comply? Since the Quartz article came out last year, Amazon has deactivated answers to bigotry. So when you now say, Alexa, you're a slut, she does this doo-doom, that shutdown sound. Siri, Google Assistant, and Bixby all have, now you can change between male and female voices. And for Amazon, the Echo and the Bixby, you can also change the wake word. I have a friend who has children, and the wake word for that is computer. It's not Alexa. And most major chatbots, of course, come out as androgynous because you don't have that problem when you're just making a dialogue in the same way that you have it when you're making voices. The bigger question we have to ask with all of this is, what actually happens to our relationships? We are in the midst of a loneliness crisis, right? This is a beautiful graph of self-reported feelings of loneliness in adolescence. When the iPhone came out, everyone was kind of like, oh, cool, I'm no more lonely. And then, oh, lo and behold, what happened? So smartphone ownership reached a 50% threshold. We all know this. We all know that we are dealing with a completely new problem that is depression, but really in the form of loneliness. So wouldn't it be fantastic if everyone would have their own guardian angel that could support them emotionally throughout the day? Right? That is the idea of Judith Masthoff, who is a researcher in the field. And yes, it would be really, really nice. But we have no idea what that means yet. And we see how confused we are with what that machine actually can do and what it should do. This is another Amazon Alexa review. Alexa, my love, since Alexa came into my life, I'm no longer alone 24 hours a day. Which begs the question, if I'm not alone, who is in the room with me? This is an adult. Now let's look at the kids, the poor kids that we always talk about.
Susan, I just want to know if you like Christmas or not.
Sorry, I can't find the answer to the question I heard.
Alexa, do you like snow? Do you like building snowmans?
I can't find the answer to the question I heard.
But Alexa, but are you?
Father.
But Alexa, are you alone in the basement?
I wasn't able to understand the question I heard.
But Alexa, are you alone in the basement?
Finally, just before midnight, she danced with Tom.
Alexa, stop it! Alexa, I just don't want you to do things. If I say go clean up the kitchen, you will.
Ooh, what? Yeah. So, everything we just talked about, yeah, it's happening. Many kids actually think Alexa lives in the basement, and many kids actually think that if Alexa doesn't have the answer, you just have to ask the other Alexa, which also lives in the same cube. There's a woman in China who has been told I love you nearly 20 million times. Her name is Xiao Weiss. She's a chatbot from Microsoft, and apparently very many people chat with her for emotional support. And because it has context, it can ask follow-up questions. How was your day? Yesterday you had a bad day. Are you still sad about your breakup? And so forth. And that has the result that 20 million people told her, I love you. So the question is, if this is the world that we need when we have a loneliness crisis, is this what's going to happen, that like in the film Her, we now have a love affair, with an emotional love affair with an artificial intelligence? And will that solve the problems? The difficulty is, again, since these are not humans but machines, they function very much after the Eyal hooked model, right? You have a trigger. The trigger in our case is uncertainty. I want a question answered. Curiosity. I want to see how you work. A very practical need, set the timer. Or loneliness and boredom. That goes into an action. I'm evoking a command. I have a curious discovery because I want to see more. The reward is going to be reassurance. I have an answer to the question. I have a task completed. I have surprise and delight when I discovered something new. Or I'm flattered, right? And that goes through to the additional investment. I give more, I repeatedly engage. I give more information. I extend the service to further areas in my life. Are we being tricked? Here's someone who's being tricked.
Look. Good.
This is what I'd wear on our date.
Right. First a traffic intersection, then maybe a show.
I'd like us to go on a date.
Yep. Yeah. It'd be fun.
So I picked this scene because for me in this movie, Ex Machina, it was the first moment where she started to reveal an agenda and an own agenda. And this is, I think, what we're all constantly worrying about is, are we being tricked? Are we being manipulated? And unfortunately, our overlearned social norms make us susceptible to such manipulation, right? A lot of different tests with human-machine interaction have shown a couple of really interesting behaviors. So feedback towards a machine is much more friendly when the machine asks about itself than when another machine asks about it. As if we're afraid to hurt the machine's feelings, right? People rank the performance of machines that are on their team as significantly better than the machines that are not on their team, even though the machines do the exact same thing. And lastly, when people are asked to help a computer they had previously collaborated with in a team situation, people do significantly more work for that computer than they do for other machines. Lastly, we are phenomenal suckers for flattery. Flattery is defined as insincere comment, so insincere praise. And studies have shown over and over whether that we react to insincere praise, even though we know it's flattery, in a very positive way. So of course, I had to try this out, and I asked Google, Alexa, and Cortana if they like my haircut.
If I could see it, I'm sure I would.
Alexa, okay. Here's Google.
I was just about to say how good it looks.
It doesn't even have eyes. I know that. And here's Cortana.
I understand you're asking my opinion, but some of my opinions are still a work in progress.
Right. The big question is, who pays your assistant's salary, right? And the answer is advertisers, most likely. Our butler may recommend services and products that further the super platform's financial interests rather than our own interests. And we sometimes falsely think that we buy a $100 machine into our home that can do everything a personal assistant can, but we don't. So how do we get it right? What we need is a framework for getting it right. And because I'm a designer, I have to look at what really helps us as people, and I like frameworks. So the first thing is, what are the axes on the framework? There's two. There's the user intention on the user side, and then on the business side, there's the permission to play. As a user intention, we have to ask, and we have to always know, what is the user's emotional state, and how does it come together? Which part do we know is due to what we're doing, and which part is due to the context that we can't see? And what are the user's ambitions? Do they actually have any ambition to change that state or to alter that state? What's the purpose of the interaction? Is it a transaction in which emotions have no place? Is it an interaction of well-being in which it becomes a little more interesting? So what is the nature of our engagement with that user? And then what is their context? On the business side, we have to ask ourselves whether we have permission to play. So, has the user given us active and explicit permission? And are we making it so that the user can revoke that permission at any given point? Do you have the right value proposition? Are you doing anything in any field that allows you and predisposes you to deal with emotions? I mentioned wellness, I mentioned these kinds of spaces, versus, no, I'm actually selling you a car, right? Do you have the right intelligence? Do you actually have the capacity to do the math in the right way? And is there a danger to being wrong? Not only a danger for the brand, but also a danger to health and a danger to the idea of AI in society at large. So that sets up our framework, our axes, right? The desire for emotion from a user perspective, and from a business perspective, the permission to play. Now we have three ways that we can design a proper emotional response. The first one is, you react like a machine. That means you acknowledge the emotions in your decision-making process, but your output continues to be like a machine, emotion-free. Example for that is, for example, conversational IVRs, right? You call a hotline, there's a machine that goes on, hi, how can I help you? And you're like, this sucks, I'm not very happy. The machine understands the emotions that you have, it understands anger, but the only thing it does is it routes you down the right path or to a person, a real person, faster. Basically acting like a giant switchboard. Not in any way reacting to your emotions. Use cases for this often cited are use cases in security. So there's about 4 companies, automotive, Automatica, and Ford is researching in this area as well. is before we all have self-driving cars and while we still have to drive ourselves, sucks, we can actually detect the emotions in a driver. And if we see anything like road rage, also fatigue and things like that, the companies can program the cars so that the car either pulls over to the side of the road or shuts down and things like that. So the machine gets deactivated the moment it becomes a harm. And last but not least, we have it in some of the assistants. You can basically yell at Google, say, shut the fuck up, and Google just shuts down. It doesn't actually come back and say, well, that wasn't really nice. So we all have that in the things that we're dabbling with on a daily basis as well. The next thing that you can do, and this is where I think it gets personally very interesting at the moment in time that we are right now, is you react like an extension of self. So you acknowledge, interpret the emotions, you expose the emotions back, and you might even empathize. But you leave the user in complete control of changing their emotions. You do nothing to manipulate that. Here's a little clip of how this could work.
I will scan you for injuries.
Don't scan me.
Scan complete.
Unbelievable.
You have sustained no injuries. However, your hormone and neurotransmitter levels indicate that you are experiencing mood swings, common in adolescence. Diagnosis? Puberty.
Whoa, what?
So a pure diagnosis of the emotions with no impulse to alter these emotions. In 2009, Philips came out with a product for that. It's called the Rationalizer. And it's basically a wristband for traders, stock traders, to realize when they're a little too emotional to trade. So you wear this wristband and there's a little, I don't know, it looked a little bit like a fire pit that comes with it that changes the color the moment you get emotionally aroused, and then the trader can still say like, yeah, this is the right time, or can say, oh, okay, I better step away from the computer. That was in 2009. One field that people get very excited when they think about this is the field of helping kids with autism detect and understand emotions. So this is probably also the only ever good implementation of a Google Glass is the idea of actually showing you what other people are feeling, so you get a better sense of what is actually going on around you, and you get a better interpretation of the world and the parts that you can't see. The whole idea becomes a little bit scarier when the person analyzing the emotions is not the person exhibiting the emotions. So, for example, in learning and classrooms, managers have tools like that, where there is now the idea that you can actually analyze the emotions of the group that you are responsible for in some way, and you can learn and improve your training skills. What sounds like science fiction is actually already live in a couple of tests in classrooms in China. The kids, unfortunately, naturally reporting that they feel under double, triple pressure now, because they are afraid that when they're, detected to be bored, it comes back to them, not to the teacher. So this is the moment you separate the person who is exhibiting the emotions from the person who's interpreting the emotions, it becomes, again, very tricky. And lastly, you can react like a human, right? So you diagnose and interpret the emotions, you give advice, or automatically trigger actions to change the emotions. Most important here that the user agrees to let the machine do that, right? Another little clip.
It's a different kind of hurt.
You are my patient. I would like to help.
You can't fix this one, buddy. What are you doing?
I am downloading a database on personal loss. Database downloaded. Treatments include contact with friends and loved ones. I am contacting them now.
No, I don't do
Your
that.
Your friends have been contacted.
Unbelievable. Now what are you doing?
Other treatments include compassion and physical reassurance.
I'm okay, really.
You will be all right. There.
Thanks, Baymax.
I am sorry about the fire.
It's okay.
So the idea that the response gets triggered automatically. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we all had that little helper and these little clues every once in a while? Take a deep breath. You feel hungry, eat an apple. Smile. The field where this becomes interesting right now is the field of psychology. There's a couple of avatars out there that have been out there for a couple of years that help people overcome their fear of going to a real psychologist. This is especially used in military cases where there's a virtual psychologist doing the first intake session.
When was the last time you felt really happy?
But I try to stay happy. I'd rather be happy. My kids keep me going.
What advice would you have given yourself 10 or 20 years ago?
To not believe, to not be so gullible,
The question is, how ready are we for this? In 2017, a petition of 17,000 signatures killed and effectively stopped a product that Mattel was going to come out to the market with, which is an AI that comforts, teaches, and entertains your children. It was this little speaker over here. It was called Aristotle. And the idea was that it would monitor your children, and as they get older, it would teach them nursery rhymes and so forth. And people were so appalled to hand over the idea of, raising your children to an AI that only 7,000 signatures was all it took to stop that product. So, when we think about these three, different reactions that we have, we map them on our framework. That's what I do. If you don't have any desire for altered emotions and you really have no permission to play, don't bother, right? Don't go there. If you have a little bit of an agenda, people are like, yeah, maybe it would be interesting, start reacting like a machine. This is where you can collect data and where you understand what's actually going on, if the user has given you permission to that, but you're still a machine because you're not fully in the space. And so forth, and so forth. The idea goes further. The more agency you get and the more permission you have and the more desire there is from a user perspective, the further you can go into the direction of actually doing an emotional inner change. What this comes down to is that in the end, people, not companies, must pick the relationships they want to have with their assistant. For me as a designer, that means we are in this constant pendulum of innovation, right? We constantly swing in this direction of what can technology do? Oh, that's so cool. And then Cambridge Analytica, damn, we go in the other direction. And we have to come back to the idea of what we actually want as people. We are the guinea pigs in our own experiment. And for me, this means I have to have an agreement on intentions in order to go into this field. I can only design what I can understand. So I can't, if I'm not a cognitive psychologist, I can't go and design like funny little Pavlov dog, like Hershey's Factory Smile things. And as with any other relationship, this is a gradual progression of intimacy. So I have to understand at what moment in time I gain a little bit more permission and I have a little bit more of a value proposition that makes sense. That's it.